So today, I'm Dharma friends. We continue from yesterday. So we stopped yesterday with the stage of non-elaboration. And so also it is said, just as it was previously, when one reaches the greater non-elaboration, which is the last stage of non-elaboration, then one has simultaneously attained the lesser or the first state of the next level, which is the level of one taste. So the next level, the third level, is one taste. So what is meant by one taste? So normally, we do not have one taste. Normally, we see a great diversity because we see everything as separately existing. So we see self and other on the outer level and on the inner level in our minds. There are many different thoughts. They all seem to be different kind of thoughts and different kind of feelings that arise. For example, we have 6 kinds of sensations, and we experience all sorts of sensations of pleasure and pain and so forth. So there seems to be a diversity. However, when one has understood the natural state of the mind and one is able to rest within that state, then one sees that all these thoughts arising are just temporary. They come and they go just like clouds in the sky. And so yesterday we mentioned that we begin with first recognizing the less intense, the kind of smaller thoughts and feelings. So first, when we come to the first of the 3 stages of one taste, which is the lesser one taste, so one recognizes that. So first one recognizes that all these feelings of pleasure and pain and so forth all have one taste ultimately within the natural state of the mind. It is also said that the thoughts and the Dharmakaya are of one taste. They are one and the same. So when one knows that, then no matter what kind of thought arises, one sees all mental arisings just like waves on water, just coming and then subsiding back into the ocean. But one doesn't see those waves as something separately existing. It's part of the water. It's not a separate thing. So just like that, one sees all the thoughts arising. And so Milarepa said that when thoughts arise and one recognizes that, then thoughts dissolve into the Dharmakaya, the natural state of the mind. So Milarepa said, isn't there someone here who can do that? In any case, one realizes that thoughts and the natural state of the mind are ultimately not separate. Milarepa also said that when one realizes that pleasure and pain or happiness and suffering are the same, then one has become like a perfect practitioner. So now we experience it all as very different feelings, various feelings of pleasure and pain and so forth. They're very strong. When one rests in the view, the natural state of the mind, when one realizes the empty nature of all appearance, one realizes also that basically they are the same in the sense that a happy thought is also just a thought. And any thought is temporary, it's momentary. And similarly, a negative suffering thought is also just a thought that is momentary. So when one recognizes that, one doesn't cling to the true existence. This is how it is, that thoughts really exist. One sees that they are just momentary appearances. And so in this way, actually, one overcomes suffering. So normally, the way we experience happiness and suffering is that they're basically 2 polar things. So it's because there is suffering that we know happiness normally. So, for example, what we call suffering is an absence of what we want, happiness. Or what appears as happiness is the absence of suffering. So that is how we perceive things. And so because we fixate on that and we try to own and cling to the happy and pleasurable experiences, then no, you grasp it and think that I always need that. I always want to have this happiness. I always want to have it. And so in this way, we hold on, we become possessive. So also Milarepa had said that actually samsaric existence has no characteristics, has no true essential nature, has no basis. But if it had one, what it is the fixation to the true existence of our thoughts. That's what creates all the confusion that in turn then creates samsara. And so we have said yesterday in the one-pointedness, we first are able to hold the thoughts at bay. So we are controlling them. And so we have attained some stability in the view. And then secondly, in the stage of non-elaboration, we have said that we completely uproot all the thoughts, not just suppress them, but we uproot them. So in one-pointedness, one has attained a state of stability that one doesn't waver from one's resting ability. And so then, even if thoughts appear, one can see that these are just like outer appearances, but nothing that appears to one can like shake one or disturb one in any way, or move one in any way. No matter what it is, it's all kind of the same, like a wave appearing on water, whether it seems to be happy or a happy thought or a sad thought, and so on. So now coming to the stage of one taste, which also has 3 levels, and the ultimate level of one taste, the greater one taste, here one ultimately realizes that Buddhas and sentient beings are one and the same. So now we think that we are different. We think that Buddhas have these perfect qualities, and in samsara there is so much suffering. But what one realizes here is that the basis of mind is one and the same. And one realizes the workings of one's habitual imprints, the karmic imprints in the mind. So one recognizes that whatever imprint there is in the mind will be projected. For example, if the imprint is one of bodhicitta, then that will be projected as the Pure Lands, as pure Buddha forms of Dharmakayas and Sambhogakayas and so forth. And then on the other hand, if the imprint is self-grasping, attachment and anger and so on, that will naturally project as the 6 realms of samsara, these are the natural manifestation of the 6 afflictive emotions. Thigten Sumgön had said that cause and effect is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So when the cause is bodhicitta, pure appearances will manifest. And when the cause is afflictive emotions or thoughts, then the appearance is the manifestation of the 6 realms of samsara. So now, to us, it appears that we are all separate, all the beings in the 6 realms. So in this world, we see a distinction between, for example, humans and animals. We think that we are separate, different beings. But actually, ultimately, also our mind is one and the same. Just on the outer level, there appears to be a separation. And that appearance is also just an inner thought, a perception that doesn't inherently exist. So then next we speak about the difference between the afflictive emotions and primordial wisdom. So even though there seems to be a difference within the ultimate space of mind, actually they are one and the same ultimately. Or that is what is meant with saying that the afflictive emotions transform into wisdom, into primordial wisdom. That is, if one is able to sustain the natural state of the mind with stability, then one transforms the afflictions into wisdom and suffering into happiness. In the one taste, one realizes that, as Milarepa had said, when you realize that happiness and suffering or pleasure and pain is the same, then you have perfected meditation. That is really the essence of one taste. And that's the most important point. So now we think that we experience happiness, we experience suffering and so forth, but actually when you really see the thought as it is, they really are the same in terms of they are just a thought. They come and they go and lack inherent existence, just like a wave on water. So they go away in the same way. The happy thought goes away, and then the sad thought also goes away. All happiness and suffering goes away, comes and goes. In the Dzogchen teachings, it is said that this is the nature of things. For example, fire can never be cold, can never have a coldness to it. So similarly, that is the nature of things. Everything has that same nature, and it cannot be any other way. So for this reason, no matter what thought arises, whatever feeling or afflictive emotion arises, it doesn't move one in any way, disturb one in any way. So the mind just stays with stability. Also yesterday we mentioned this quotation where we said one should nurture the spark of wisdom through mindfulness over and over again. So we have said that awareness is like fire. It begins just with a spark, but when the fire becomes really powerful, then effortlessly it can burn away anything. So all of this is really from speaking from an experiential perspective. And also Milarepa said that meditation must be connected to an actual experience. So that's most important. So we have those three different names of one-pointedness, non-elaboration, and one taste. So they just have different names, but actually they are the same in the sense of a progression of one's mental stability. So that's actually explained very clearly in the Ganges Mahamudra from an experiential perspective. And so in that text it says that in the beginning, so as a beginning practitioner, meditation is still a little bit difficult. It's difficult for one to stay single-pointedly in meditation. So it says in the text that in the beginning the mind is like a waterfall, fiercely gushing down. In the beginning we try to meditate, but it's hard to even recognize all of our thoughts, and we can't stay still. And then secondly, next it says, then in the middle, after a while, the mind becomes like the river Ganges, flowing gently. So then the mind begins to calm down a bit. So then that is where we move from first one-pointedness, we then move to non-elaboration. So in that second stage we come to non-elaboration. And so here, in the state of non-elaboration, one no longer analyzes the arising thoughts or clings to a dualistic existence, and so therefore one is able to liberate, let go of all the thoughts that arise. So that is called liberation upon arising. The mind becomes relaxed at this stage. And then the third stage, in that text it says, in the end, the mind becomes like all the rivers, the confluence of all the rivers in the ocean. So then in the end one becomes like the still ocean, which is just like the meeting of a mother and her child. And so here we achieve one taste when the mind becomes still. And so in one taste, if you have the text in there, it mentions that. So one in a one taste, one experiences the manifold as one taste, and one taste as the manifold. So the manifold having one taste means that there appears to be a great multiplicity of appearances in samsara and nirvana, but they all have one taste. So a multiplicity has one taste. Multiplicity means that there is a great variety of appearances. For example, there are the endless qualities of a Buddha that we cannot even put into words, and then endless pure lands and enlightened activities. But they are all of one taste because they all arise from the mind, the same mind. And similarly, also in samsara, the 6 realms of samsara, or the 3 lower realms, all the suffering of samsara also arises from the mind. So in that sense, they are all of one taste. So therefore, even though there's an experience of happiness and suffering, it all has one taste. But temporarily, it is due to virtuous actions that we experience happiness. And so with virtue is meant a mind of love and compassion. And non-virtue is a mind of self-clinging. When there is a mind of self-clinging or self-grasping on the basis, then everything becomes non-virtuous. It is said the perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So there's this verse in the 37 practices. So the suffering comes from wishing for one's own happiness, and the Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. And so basically we just give them different names. We call that's virtue, that's non-virtue, but it's really just that. It is bodhicitta, it is love that leads to all happiness and nothing else. That's the cause of happiness. We always make this prayer, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. So it really is the relative bodhicitta, or love and compassion. And the cause of suffering is self-grasping. And so when one separates from self-grasping, one will separate naturally from the dualistic perception of self and other. Because first, when there is self-grasping, there is a perception of a me, a self. And if there is a perception of a self, one also perceives other. And when one perceives other, then dualistic grasping arises. And when one sees things in a dualistic way, one develops thoughts of attachment and anger and so forth, and then accumulates karma. So again, Milarepa had said that the basis of samsara has no characteristics. If anything is at the basis, what is at the ground of samsara is a thought. It arises out of a thought of me and I, and a thought thinking that appearances possess a concrete existence. So then again, so a multiplicity appears as one taste. All multiplicity has one taste. So although there are many sentient beings, many Buddhas, they all have the same nature of the mind. And then when one realizes the nature of that mind, then one taste appears as multiplicity. Then also one sees it goes the other way around. So if one recognizes the nature of the mind, then the multiplicity, for instance, of the thoughts in the mind, as many as there are dust particles in a sun ray, all arise from the same mind. So when one recognizes that, it is just like all the thoughts that arise dissolve back into the mind, just like when pouring salt into water, it dissolves instantly. Or it is like all the water in the world, or it is like clouds in the sky. It all has the same nature. So, for example, with water and clouds, it actually always goes in circles like that. It appears in different ways, but then in the end, it always is the same. So, for example, you have the rain falling down from the clouds into the ocean, and then the water evaporates from the ocean, and then it goes up as some kind of like mist and back into the sky, and again becomes a cloud, and then again the rain comes down and so forth. So this is how everything kind of goes in circle, and even though it appears in so many different ways, it's all the same thing, has one taste. So what one realizes here is that appearances, the way things appear is one's own mind, and the mind itself is empty of self-nature, meaning that there is no self and no other existing separately. And so the understanding of one taste actually is an understanding that needs to arise in your day-to-day activities. So normally, in our day-to-day activities, when we reflect on that, you can see a multiplicity, but when you really observe, you can see that it is really true that a multiplicity has one taste. It all comes from your own mind. So you can understand that very clearly in your day-to-day life too. And so if you understand that, then the way you will understand it is, for example, there's one example that I have come up with, and that is, in this world, everyone has a phone, a hand phone. And every phone is powered by the same electricity. And even though there are so many different phones, there's not many different electricities, there's only one. So actually, if you think of it in this way, you can understand it very easily. You can understand the mind very easily. As a matter of fact, the mind and like electrical energy have actually the same essence. So therefore, since through this realization, when you realize the nature of the mind, you transcend all suffering. There is really nothing that's more important. It's so important to realize the nature of the mind. And if you see how important it is, you will be able to make an effort and be diligent. If not, then if you don't consider it as so important, then you might have some interest in meditation, but then usually we just meditate when we suffer. And when we suffer, then we go and we meditate and practice shamatha. And for the most part of our lives, all the time really, we really care about the activities of this life only. And so it is good to have an ongoing state of practice. And so remember on these two lines, these two statements. So a multiplicity has one taste, and one taste appears as multiplicity. So that's very important to understand. When you understand that one taste appears as multiplicity, then you also understand that a multiplicity has one taste. And then you understand, as it is said, that everything that appears in samsara and nirvana actually is your own mind. It is your own intrinsic awareness and nothing other than you, nothing else. And that mind itself, the nature of that mind, is clear and empty. So there is a vibrant, conscious quality to it, but also it is empty, just like space, like the sky. And so that is something that needs to be understood on the basis of an experience. One needs to really kind of connect this understanding to an actual experience through meditation practice. Then it will really be of benefit. And so for me, this has been very beneficial, and I'm actually a very sinful person. But through all these things I have experienced, my trust in karma actually has grown stronger and stronger. And if I'm afraid of something, then it is karma. I'm careful about karma. Because that's an important point too, because some people say that when one realizes emptiness, then there is no more karma. But that is actually not true. Jigten Sumgön had also said that actually when one realizes emptiness, then karma or cause and effect appears as the kind of the reflection or the kind of the radiance of emptiness, of this realization. So then here in our text, the Dharmakirti Shalom, or the oral instructions by Dharmakirti, in the text then for the lesser one taste, it says, at the stage of lesser one taste, one has realized that thoughts and perceptions have one taste within mind itself, that is Mahamudra. However, one still retains a slight fixation on this experience or some attachment to a conviction of this recognition. So this term here, the fixation on a slight fixation, a grasping on this experience. So there are still some subtle thoughts of basically hope and fear in the mind. There is some grasping in the mind. For example, grasping meaning that you think. So, for example, you think a thought has arisen. You know, now a thought has arisen. And then I meditated, and then the thought disappeared. So you have these concepts arising in your mind. And so, no, there's a kind of a heedfulness and an introspection. You're looking at what arises, and that is subtly conceptual, this introspective mind. So also in Dzogchen speaks about an introspective mind an awareness that is alert. So then you know, now I'm grasping, now a thought has arisen, and a habitual tendency has arisen, or a feeling of bliss has arisen, or a thought of this is one taste. So there's these subtle thoughts arising in the mind. So that you know, you're thinking something has arisen, and now it's gone, now it's liberated. So there is this slight analytical mind still that's there at this point. A slight fixation, a slight grasping. And so then we call this mind awareness, or Rigpa, intrinsic awareness, that we become increasingly aware of. And Rigpa means the mind that is extremely clear, the utterly clear mind. So when your meditation is very clear, when the mind is very sharp, then the moment the thought arises, it goes away. The moment the thought is seen by this sharp awareness, it is already liberated. So the way thoughts arise is like they arise and already they're gone in an instant, just like that. But then there is still a very slight grasping, a thought in the mind of knowing what's happening. Also, that is explained in the Samantabhadra prayer. So first, there is a state of unmindfulness. When there's a state of unmindfulness, then we reinforce our negative habitual or karmic patterns, the imprints in the mind. And then due to these imprints, various feelings of bliss, for example, and so forth arise. So you think that this is a very nice experience, and then you just feel this experience of great bliss. And also if it's an unpleasant experience, and there is a negative reaction to that, but it's very subtle here at this stage. It's a very subtle reaction to mental arisings here in this stage. And so in the Samantabhadra prayer, it says, slowly, imprints grow stronger and thicker. So normally, in an ordinary sense now, we have the coarse afflictions of attachment and anger, and their subtle counterparts are hope and fear. So in brief, here one has not entirely liberated the subtle forms of hope and fear. So there are subtle forms of hope and fear at the stage of the lesser one taste. And then the medium one taste, it says at the stage of medium one taste, one experiences the manifold as one taste, and having purified the stains of fixating on one's conviction, one attains a vivid realization of appearances and mind as inseparable. One realizes that there are no separate appearances outside, nor a mind inside. So one realizes that there is no separate appearance outside or a mind that is inside. So for example, when you're inside of a building, normally you have this perception of I am inside a building. There's this natural feeling that you're inside, not outside. When you're meditating and not grasping at that, sometimes when you're in the building meditating and you close your eyes meditating, sometimes there's no more sensation. You don't feel that there's a house around you any longer. You forget. It's almost like there is no house. And then you open your eyes again, and then the house is back. So this is often what happens when there is no grasping in the mind. But when there is grasping in the mind, then you perceive that you are inside something. So you perceive there is this house, and I'm inside this house, and then there's an outside to this house, and so on. So that is the when one sees things in an ordinary way. Ultimately, actually, there is no separation between inside and outside. And so, then it says, at the stage of greater non-taste, one realizes the manifold is one taste, and the realization of one taste manifests as the manifold. Everything subsides into a natural state of equanimity. So when all grasping thoughts have become purified, then there is no more perception of separation. There is a house, and there's me, and so on. So you can kind of try that out. You just visualize the form of a large deity. Now, some people, when they visualize the form of a large deity, that goes way beyond them, then often they feel that it's difficult for them to visualize because eventually it reaches the roof, and then it kind of bumps into the roof, and it can't fit basically into the room because there seems to be an obstruction. So when there is no grasping, there is also no inner and outer, no obstruction. So you can visualize anything really. So you can try that out without really analyzing it in terms of is it this or is it not. You just in an instant just visualize a very large deity or anything, and see how there is no obstruction around you. And so this is how we liberate ourselves from these thoughts of grasping at the outer and the inner. And so if not yet liberated, then again we need to persist in the practice of maybe not analyzing, but thinking deeper about the generation stage practice of the deity. And so a multiplicity appears as one taste, and one taste appears as multiplicity. And through understanding that, actually one's trust in karma increases even more. And now one becomes free from was in the previous stage, anyways, the grasping at one's experience that one has gained. And so now when many people practice meditation, and they all do recognize their afflictive emotions, but often even though we recognize our emotions, we still cannot let go of them. And so here it is important to understand that one taste appears as multiplicity. Or as we said before, in terms of karma, cause and effect is the natural manifestation of one's moment-to-moment thoughts. So, for example, humans and animals. Think about the difference between humans and animals. So it seems, of course, that there is a difference in terms of their appearance. But the mind actually is one and the same. It is just that an animal is born in such a shape of an animal due to the karma of ignorance. And ignorance actually is also related to having doubts in the mind. For example, we have a lot of doubts when it comes to the nature of the mind, or we misunderstand things, we have a wrong understanding, or we do not understand anything, or we have a partial understanding, and so forth. Or some people have doubts, they doubt karma, and they doubt the nature of the mind, or they doubt emptiness, and so forth. Or they doubt the view, which is the nature of the mind. And so then they accumulate karma, and then that leads to such fixation. And so now here, when we engage in practice, so how do we practice? So when anger arises, for example, so first anger arises, and then there is this imprint. So this grasping basically means that there is this impression that is made with each thought that arises. So an impression is made in the mind, and then that stays in the mind. So after we have died, we have left behind the body, the impressions, these imprints are still in the mind. And so then the appearances of the bardo then become to manifest. And that is because of this impression, this imprint that we have left in the mind by anything that we did and all the thoughts we have cultivated. And so as a result of that, for example, if the imprint was one of anger and hatred, and then also mixed with ignorance, then one is born as a more frightening animal, like a poisonous snake or a scorpion and so on. And they already appear, that their shape, their appearance is really quite unpleasant. And they're also quite dangerous, they're also poisonous. So really they are really a manifestation, a natural manifestation of the inner thought of anger or hatred. And ultimately, however, our mind is the same. Or when you think of little ants, for example, little ants also have a certain kind of karma of always kind of staying busy and always working really hard, actually just like people, running around like people. And so when we think about that, when we observe the animals like that, then maybe some fear of karma arises. And you recognize that if I don't purify my mind, then those seeds, these impressions, they will remain within the mind. So I must, by all means, purify my mind. Because if I do not, then with 100% certainty, I will be looking just like that. Like this, I will take birth as such an animal. So this is really how we actually put this understanding into what again experience. It is, for example, by observing the animals, and then when you gain this experience by seeing the animals, for instance, then you will begin to feel inspired by meditation, and you will want to make an effort to practice and to purify your mind of all these negative emotions. So it really comes from a fear of karma, of karmic ripening. And so so you know that if the anger remains within the mind, then such an appearance of an animal like a snake or a scorpion will ripen. And so anger and jealousy and so forth ripen in these negative forms. We can actually see them. They're real manifestations of negative emotions. So their outer appearance is quite dreadful, and also they are quite dangerous. They can poison us and so on. So in this, through understanding this and reflecting about karma in this way, develop some kind of certainty in karma. And as we said before, then everything is not just empty, because karma really is the radiance of emptiness. So they are not separate. Because some people claim that, when you realize emptiness, everything is empty, so therefore there is no karma. But that's really not the case at all. That's not true at all. Also, there is a teaching in the Dzogchen teachings on that, which is also related to the fixation and how this plays an imprint into the mind. For example, it is explained in the Samantabhadra prayer, which is related to the Dzogchen teachings, that explains the experience of practicing one taste. So in that prayer it says, when you encounter a sense pleasure, so for example when lust arises, do not abandon it, but also do not accept it, do not take it on. So what that means is that you can enjoy a sense pleasure, but what you should look at is, am I beginning to cling and being attached? So how can you recognize that? It is when you start thinking, I want this again, I always want this. That's when you become attached. And so when you realize one taste, then a sense of contentment arises. Basically, if the object is present, then it is fine. And if it is not present, then it is also fine. Basically, you are content with whatever comes your way or not. So this is how one taste is really practiced in the day-to-day activities. This is how it should become. And so this is how we bring the experience gained in meditation into our day-to-day activities. Milarepa also said that this is what we need to do. We need to bring our experience into our day-to-day activities. And he said that when you realize that there is no difference between happiness and sadness or pleasure and pain, then you have perfected the conduct, or like one's daily conduct. So that is the result of having mastered one taste. So reflect upon that. So sometimes think about karma in this way, previously mentioned way, or sometimes also reflect on the empty nature. And so how do you reflect on the empty nature? So for example, when thoughts and afflictive emotions arise, empty here means that you know that they are in essence empty and they can go away, they will go away. And when they go away, then the mind remains in its pure natural state. Also in the Dzogchen teachings, and Njime Lingpa also said that do not lose the stability of your own awareness. This instruction is extremely beneficial, actually. So the stability of your own awareness is to sustain a clear mind, clear mindfulness, that when sustained, will recognize whatever arises, the moment it arises. So when an afflictive emotion arises, you instantly recognize it and you meditate. And then even a very powerful emotion will go away if you do not grasp at it, if you do not hold on to it. So, for example, even if you got really angry with the person and you had an argument, if you meditate within that state and it completely goes away, then even though you had a fight, there's no feeling left behind. So when you meet the person again, there is no negative feeling that arises within you. You don't cling to a self and other and the other person and so forth and what the other person did. You do know what the other person did, but there is no feeling of anger at all left behind. So that is when an emotion arises, but it arises within mindfulness and in this way becomes purified instantly, and then you only stay within that state of clarity. And you should make an effort in that, so that when the afflictive emotion can arise, but then you have to completely let go of it, so that not even a feeling of it later on is left behind, no feeling of resentment and so on. And that is actually a quality of anger, for example, because anger has a quality of clarity. When the anger arises, because of its clear quality, actually it is quite easy to liberate anger. It is said it's quite easy to liberate anger. It's much more difficult to liberate or let go of desire or attachment, because desire is also related to bliss, a blissful experience, so it's more difficult to liberate, unless one practices the channels, winds and drops and so on. Otherwise, it's quite difficult. But it is said that it's easier to liberate anger. And it's also very beneficial. In the Dzogchen teachings, for this reason, actually, it even says that you should bring up your anger, because you need it in order to liberate it. And so, again, in terms of your own practice, even though we keep calling it different names, Mahamudra and Dzogchen and so on, don't think of it as something different. Don't think that I'm practicing Mahamudra or Dzogchen and so on. Basically, which instruction belongs to what. Basically, you should practice whatever helps you the most to realize the nature of mind. And then we come to the stage of non-meditation. So first, at the stage of lesser non-meditation, deliberate mindfulness and meditation are no longer necessary, and appearances arise as meditation. However, merely subtle and illusory fixations are still present. So now, in the state of non-meditation, eventually meditation becomes effortless. So when one is always mindful, one begins to see everything as illusory by nature. So one doesn't think that anything is true, anything is real, but also not that things are not real, things are unreal. There's simply no thought. So if you think that nothing is real, so everyone knows that things do not really inherently exist. So we can know that, but we don't grasp it, we don't analyze that. So we know that things are impermanent because they are compounded, but we cannot say that they exist, nor can we say that they do not exist. So in terms of the mind, without thinking that it exists nor that it doesn't exist, look directly without a thought at your mind. And as I mentioned before, then eventually, through not grasping at existence or non-existence, appearances and mind will become one, will merge. Which means that while you still see things, there is no thought of these things are real or a thought of these things are unreal, not real. There is no thought whatsoever, but the experience is like your mind is like all pervasive, pervades them all. There's just no, things are there, but they're all pervaded by your mind. So therefore, the appearances themselves are like illusions. So don't think that they are true, nor that they are untrue. And especially, one shouldn't grasp at the empty nature, at emptiness at all. And so when things appear as illusory, then just remain within that without grasping or thinking about it. So that we call appearance or emptiness, the empty nature of appearances, which is also the nature of the deities. The deities appear, but just like a rainbow in the sky, like an illusion. So you can't say that a rainbow is a real thing because it's not a substantial thing. But then you also can't say that there is no rainbow because you can see it clearly. So this union of appearance and emptiness is what we call the union of the two truths. And wherein appearances appear but like illusions. So in brief, the point is that you don't analyze or grasp at anything whatsoever to be either true or not true, or to possess any concrete existence, but everything is illusory. Then at the stage of medium non-meditation, illusory fixations are completely purified, after which the continuity of day and night becomes a single state of non-meditation. In the subsequent realization, a subtle aspect of consciousness as self-cognizance remains. So before we said day and night, this is continuity, day and night of meditation. So it is said that when one recognizes the dream state at night, which is also then called to recognize the luminosity of sleep and also the luminosity of the deep sleep state, that when one recognizes even the sleep state, that is then when one has reached this continuity of day and night. And if one has not recognized the luminosity of mind in the sleep state, then one has not achieved such a continuity of meditation day and night. Then it still remains more of an aspiration toward that. But still, there's actually an instruction about that we can practice. So that is when you go to sleep, before you go to sleep, as you fall asleep, try to fall asleep in a state of mindfulness and wake up within a state of mindfulness. So the moment you wake up, don't think something like, oh, I slept or something like that, but wake up within a state of meditation instantly, without allowing any other thoughts to interrupt that state. And if you practice that, then the sleep will also become much lighter, and then it's more easy to recognize the sleep state. So try to be very mindful the very moment you wake up. And that is similar to sustaining a continuity of day and night. And that will eventually lead into that. So eventually, as a result, you will recognize the luminosity of the deep sleep state. And so for now, this is a very difficult thing to accomplish. It's extremely difficult to recognize the deep sleep state. And even if we do, often it only lasts for a flash of an instant. But if we truly recognize it, as it is described here, this is what is called attaining enlightenment as a Dharmakaya. But in any case, for us, we should try to be mindful the moment you wake up. So you fall asleep mindful and you wake up in a meditative state. And if that's difficult, then think of a Yidam deity, for example. If you're able to remember your Yidam deity the very moment you wake up from sleeping, it is said then later after death, when you come into the bardo, you will become enlightened in the nature of that Yidam deity as a Sambhogakaya. When you recognize the deep sleep luminosity, it is said you will attain the Dharmakaya at the time of death. So there are basically three different levels of Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, three different paths of practice. So one is the Dharmakaya, which is to wake up within a meditative state, the nature of the mind, without any thought. And the second one is the Sambhogakaya, which is to remember the Yidam deity the moment you wake up, without a thought intervening. And the third one is the Nirmanakaya, which is to wake up within a state of love and compassion. And that leads to a birth as a Nirmanakaya. So these three levels of practice are extremely important. And you should practice them when you go to sleep. So again, Milarepa had said he also said that when the dreams or the nighttime perceptions and the daytime perceptions become one and the same, you have perfected meditation. So we have these perceptions of the daytime, the various feelings, and then we have the feelings that we have when we dream at night, and there seems to be a difference. But when you practice in this way, then they will become almost like the same. So what that means is that then during the daytime, the various feelings that arise will be not so strong anymore. You see them more like a dream, and you don't really cling to the reality of what is happening. So the feelings will be much less intense, and you more have an attitude of whatever happens, and anything that happens is fine. So this is what happens also when you have mastered one taste. So again, there's two important points, two experiences here. One is to sustain mindfulness when you fall asleep, and when you wake up within a state of meditation, or remember the Yidam deity, or remember love and compassion. And in this way, you have a path to attain enlightenment after death in the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and or the Nirmanakaya. So that's one. And then the second one is that in your day-to-day activities, just try to view all of the various appearances as not so solid, not so real, and just make them become more like dreamlike, so that they don't generate these powerful emotions or feelings. And then when you practice that, all these emotions of happiness and suffering become more and more equalized. So this is actually also related to the practice of one taste. But so anyways, here we were talking about the medium non-meditation. And so this one line here, that's very important. this subtle aspect of consciousness, as in the next lines, Rinpoche read the great non-meditation. So in the end, even the subtle consciousness transforms into primordial wisdom. So that is an extremely important point. It's really important to understand the difference between this consciousness and primordial wisdom. So you surely should understand the difference between them. So the consciousness, as long as there is still consciousness, there still is, at least here, a subtle grasping of a self. There is a perception of a me. A consciousness perceives a me. Even in meditation, there is a subtle grasping of I am meditating, or I have understood, I have realized, and so on. There is this concept of a me that's still there in a subtle way. And it becomes primordial wisdom when there is no more thought of self and other, no more dualistic thought at all. There is no more thought of self or other at all. So that is also called the self-arisen primordial wisdom. And self-arisen also is a significant term. So Milarepa had said that in terms of the one, when one taste is attained, then the self-arisen primordial wisdom, awareness, arises naturally within. So the point of self-arisen means that it arises on its own naturally. Naturally, there is no thought of self or other. Naturally, you understand. So there is no thought, no need to think, I understood, I'm understanding. There's no need to conceptualize it. It happens on its own. So wisdom arises on its own from within this state. So when we go to sleep, coming back to the sleep, when we go to sleep, first we fall into this unconscious state. And then when you wake up from sleeping, and you wake up within awareness, you're waking up within the space expanse of primordial awareness, which is the Dharmakaya. And that really is the heart essence, the core of all practice. It's very important. Also for later in the Bardo after death. So in the Bardo, there are 3 ways to attain enlightenment in the 3 kayas, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. These are extremely important, precious instructions. And so in brief, coming back to that quote by the Vidyadhara Jigme Lingpa, he had said that, do not lose the stability of your own awareness. And that awareness really is primordial wisdom here. These words by Jigme Lingpa are very significant, and I always hold on to them and think about them again and again, because they are quite easy to understand too. So this awareness that doesn't lose its stability. So this is what we need to understand. And what that means is that when awareness doesn't lose stability, then even though thoughts or afflictions arise, they are transformed into primordial wisdom upon arising. So you should look at whether or not that is the case. You are doing that. So look at your experience. When an afflictive emotion arises, does it become primordial wisdom? Or is it often maybe the other way around, that wisdom becomes afflictive emotions? And in that case, we are following our karmic winds, which lead us to wander in samsara. So this is really the most important, crucial point, the essential point to understand. And it's really summarized by Jigme Lingpa's words, do not lose the stability of awareness. There's nothing else necessary. There's nothing higher that could be taught by, 100 scholars or 1,000 siddhas, or 100,000 or 10,000, pith instructions, and then what was the... anyways, and then also Rinpoche mentioned before, so basically there's no higher instruction than that. And so to reach that state is the result, the final result. And so within that, there's no separation between Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and so forth. And so that completes now the instructions on the 4 yogas of Mahamudra. And that was very brief, and there are many more elaborate instructions on that, like books and so on, that you can read. And also, the most important words on that really are teachings on the 4 yogas by Milarepa, which are really excellent if you want to read them. So, Dharma friends, now I explained that to you as well as I could. And if I've made any mistakes, then I ask all the great scholars for forgiveness.
All